You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this show. So we realized that our schedule, I got to address this at the beginning of the show because I know the schedule's been a little bit crazy, but just stick with it. We really do try to go live every Monday and Friday at 8. We weren't able to do the show, unfortunately, at the last minute because if any of you guys are following anything to do with Michigan, we had a bunch of brutal storms. Your power was out, right?
Yep. For 3 days.
Yeah, a lot of stuff was acting. Yeah, it was just crazy. Just absolutely craziness. But we're here now, and, we're pretty much ready to talk some Solo. This is getting kind of exciting because this is the first time now we're moving out of the saga-based films, and we're getting into some of the standalones. So, as I was rewatching Solo last night and making the PowerPoints and all that, I was really looking forward to this because there's just a lot of things that I think we can get into on this.
Yes, yeah, Solo was definitely it was a fun ride, some people didn't really feel like they needed, Solo. They felt like that was, an unnecessary film, but I found it to be kind of fun. We got to find out some things, some key moments, which we'll get into, as far as Chewbacca, Lando, how he got the Falcon, all that, things that led up, things that filled in the gaps that we've heard from the original trilogy. So, yeah, it was a fun ride for me.
Yeah, and I got to say, honestly, for me, it's a better movie than I remember it being. When I was rewatching it, because like you, I thought the same thing. And I think we actually brought this up at the time that it was being released, honestly, where we were railing into it. Like, who needs a Han Solo origin story?
Right.
And of course it's not Harrison Ford, and we're just sitting there going, oh, come on, this is just such a waste or whatever. I mean, I remember both of us were very critical leading up to this movie. And I remember that when we saw it, we thought, yeah, this is a really cool, Ronaldo's with us. What's up, Ronaldo?
Hey.
Yeah, I thought, it was like a really fun, cool ride, but obviously a little bit of the vitriol that was going against The Last Jedi, I think, rubbed off on it. I think that this movie was released a little bit too soon because The Last Jedi came out in December of 2017, and then Solo came out in, I don't know, like May of 2018 or something like that. So it was really like a 6-month window, and I think that people were still somewhat against Star Wars at that time. But
yeah,
I'll tell you
man.
this. Well, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to say that, a lot of people were kind of wondering, like, who's going to play Han, because,
right,
like you said, Harrison Ford wasn't playing him. So now you have to have some new person trying to mimic Harrison Ford's portrayal of Han and, Billy D. Williams and everything like that. So there was a whole lot of things. And one of the big things is that there wasn't a whole lot of promotion for Solo.
Oh, that's right. They didn't release a trailer till like 2 weeks before the movie or something.
It was like a month, maybe before, month and a half, maybe before the movie was
teaser,
released.
yeah.
And it was just like, okay, because we kept saying, like, when are we going to get something from? Because it's supposed to come out, like, And I think that partially what hurt sales, and the other big part that we have to acknowledge is the fact of, they're switching directors like in the middle of the thing. That was another big deterrent for a lot of fans from going to go see Solo. So a lot of people were hesitant and didn't do as well in the box office as most people would have liked or hoped. But that's because of these. Partly it was promotion. The other part was the director snafu. So
yeah, that's true. When Lord and Miller had finished like 80% of the film, and then they had to bring in Ron Howard, and a lot of the stuff, ironically, was kept. And again, upon rewatching, I could see the Lord and Miller influence on a lot of those scenes. But another thing that has to be brought up that I sort of forgot about too, and I think that we addressed this, because remember, we reviewed the film when it came out. But one of the biggest problems I think with Solo was the fact that they had released episode 7, they released episode 8, and then they dropped Solo. Like, they go 7, Rogue One, 8, Solo. And I think people were starting to go, well, wait, is this 9? Is it, you know what I mean? They didn't really do a good job in the marketing as far as clarifying what they were doing.
Yeah, as far as like what the time period, the time jumping, it was kind of confusing for a lot of people.
Sure, it was all over the place because, this is the first time. I mean, people I think are more used to that now because you have a lot of the Disney Plus shows. And if you were to do the standalone films now, right, they're more conditioned with Marvel. Ronaldo says, I remember thinking that this movie wasn't necessary, but when I saw it, it was like, that was really fun. And
yeah, exactly.
It was, but I'll tell you, man, again, rewatching it yesterday, my opinion of this movie has really gone up tremendously. Like, I think it's more than really fun. I actually think that more than even Rogue One, because we all know how much I love Rogue One, still absolutely adore Rogue One. But I think Solo actually does a better job of capturing the essence of Star Wars. And I think part of the problem is when it came out and maybe those first few rewatches afterwards, you basically were comparing and all that. Now that we've been able to step back and we also have all this other Star Wars content that's come out since, so Solo doesn't stick out so much. It kind of sits nicely with some of this other stuff. It's a really well done movie, especially considering the point that you brought up, which is, I mean, this thing was essentially 80% done before they fired directors and under-promoted, and so Ronaldo's got a couple little chats I want to get to before we start breaking this down. He says, I think people at the time were more like against someone else being Harrison Ford. That's true, and it doesn't help that we just had him on episode 7. Yeah. And then, he agrees with us too. He says, also the publicity started a little too late. This is one of those movies that had become beloved on streaming. That's a good point.
Yeah, because everybody started claiming for Solo too. Now, like after a while, people started kind of catch on. It was like, it bombed at the box office by Star Wars standards, but then everybody started saying like, oh, when's Solo 2 coming out? I'm like,
right.
Huh?
It's like, what? You mean the movie that you guys didn't even think we needed or whatever? And then Ronaldo finally says, if this movie came out today, I think it would have done better. And,
absolutely.
I absolutely agree with that. I definitely think if the movie came out today, it would have done far better than what it was at the time. And again, as we go into this breakdown now, I think you guys will start to see they had some great characters in this thing. They had some great villains in this. I mean, this is really a much better movie than I think what people remember, honestly. All right.
Yep.
Got anything else? Are you ready to break it down?
Break it down, man.
All right, let's break it down. Okay, so first of all, we have to start with the fact that much like Rogue One, now, I will say that I actually like this intro a lot better than the Rogue One intro. I mean, again, one of the things that they decided to do to separate everything from the saga films was to do away with the opening crawl, which both you and I were dead set against. Right. We understood the reasoning, but that's part of what makes Star Wars Star Wars.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's having the opening crawl is more synonymous though with the saga films though.
Yeah.
And I know that up until this point, that's kind of like all we knew was the saga films. And so then when we get to the standalone films, with Rogue One and Solo, it becomes a thing where now it's like, okay, well, what do you really?
Yeah, what do you do?
Do you do open the crawl? Do you, because it's still a part of the Star Wars franchise and part of the Star Wars, more importantly, the film lineage of Star Wars, and that's another big thing. But I like this though. I like this was kind of concise.
Yeah, this was actually better. I mean, if you guys remember the opening crawl for, well, I shouldn't even say that, the intro to Rogue One,
For
it just,
yeah, it was terrible.
boom, it just like, I mean, it just had this stinger or something, and then it was just there.
And the font and everything was just it was funky, man. It was
man,
like...
yes, I forgot about that. Oh, that font
Remember
was
that?
terrible. Yes,
Terrible. I was like,
oh,
what is this? I got nervous the moment I saw that. I was like, oh,
I
this movie's
know.
gonna suck.
Well, the only reason, I think one of the only things that prevented me from getting totally nervous about it was the fact that when we were watching reviewers that think along the lines that we do usually, it was a little bit different. You know, they were saying, okay, the opening sucks, but it does get better. Because I was the same way. I'm like, what? This looks like a fan-made film. And the other thing is, you know, they were going all over the place. I mean, there was like 5 planets in the first minute and a half of the movie. And I'm sitting there thinking, is there a guide? Do I need to, you know, do I need to take notes or, you know?
Yeah, it's like one of those maps.
Yeah.
Like, okay, now we're here, like in
Right.
a mall. Like,
right. I mean, do I get a little earpiece, you know, where somebody's like kind of narrating and following along? I mean, what's the deal? So, yeah, you know, it starts out with this. And of course, you know, one of the first things we see is that Solo basically steals a speeder or whatever. And he's pretty much working for this, our first, I guess, kind of villain, right? Lady Proxima.
Mhm.
This is one of those things. And I thought the design was cool. And I actually thought she was a really good character. The only problem I had with her was, unlike the Hutts, they made her speak this like English, and you know, it just kind of took away from it a little bit, I think.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was, but she was
Lady
threatening though.
Proxima was, she was threatening. She was definitely creepy looking, but it was just, you know, I personally, I think I could have done without her. I probably would have preferred, like, you know, the Pikes or something like that.
Well, and we do get, well, they're mentioned. I don't,
Right.
you know, we don't really get to see them full on, but they are mentioned. And I think a lot of it, and again, rewatching this, I honestly believe that there's a lot of things that I thought when I first, like even the first couple of times I saw this, that were not true now. And I think maybe for the first time, I was really watching this movie more objectively. Because I wasn't, and watching it objectively, it's amazing how much things change. Because even Lady Proxima, at the time I thought she was a cool character, but there were a lot of things that really bugged me about it. And again, the only thing that really bugged me about her this time was the fact that she spoke English, but she was threatening, and I thought the character actually was good. You know, and again, it's also an expansion. One of the things about this film is that it does expand the Star Wars universe quite a bit.
Oh, yeah.
But it does so within the confines of some characters. Like, we follow some characters that we know, and maybe that's a good way of expanding Star Wars to where everybody's, you know, it's not totally foreign to where it doesn't feel like Star Wars, but yet it gives you something, like you have something to anchor everything while you're watching all this new stuff hit. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then, of course, you know, they end up obviously stealing the coaxium, which is this, it's like, it makes hyperfuel or something. I still never really fully understood the whole coaxium thing.
It's like the coaxium is kind of like the main ingredient to make hyperfuel. So it's kind of one of those things that you need to fuel hyperdrives and things of that. Like, that's the main, like almost like a petroleum type thing, or if you will.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And I mean, again, the whole thing to where Solo, and this is where we're introduced to Qi'ra, and Kira's going to be a character that I'm going to end up talking. I mean, first of all, she is a prominent character in this film, but she really, I mean, this is another character, although I didn't, you know, like when I first saw Ahsoka, I hated Ahsoka, and then she became one of my favorite characters. To a lesser degree, so, you had that, like, hate here and then now love here, right? To a lesser degree, it was more like I liked Qi'ra, now I really, really love Qi'ra. And again, this is because of a lot of things that have been expanded. But looking through that, now I'm looking at Qi'ra through a slightly different lens. And again, a lot of times people forget this, but she was originally, at least that name, was in George Lucas's treatment for Episode 7. And it was spelled differently, but I don't know. I don't know if it was Lord Miller. I don't know who basically did it, but somebody basically boosted the character and stuck her in a Solo, which I thought was cool. And their whole little play between Han and, her, and the fact that he had dreams, he wanted to be, he just wanted to be a really great pilot and run away with her, and, they had their own ship and all that. And so they were both kind of like these really broke, poor street criminals, I guess. And this is really what they wanted to do, And the chemistry was pretty good. And I remember at the time, I wasn't 100% sold on Alden Ehrenreich being Han Solo yet. He had some of the mannerisms and stuff down, but I didn't see Han Solo in him yet.
The thing about a young Han Solo, he reminds you of a young James T. Kirk. That's exactly who, for me, that's who he kind of reminds me of.
No, I agree. I totally agree.
That cool daredevil kind of like, everything is going to be all right. No problems. Yes, we're facing imminent danger here, but I got it. It's just kind of that he has that confidence, the swagger, of course, but there's more to James Kirk. He does have emotions, he does care, and he'll sacrifice himself. He'll put himself in situations, and so that's what I got from the Alden Ehrenreich portrayal of Solo, was just kind of like you had a little bit, of course, of the Han that we know from Episode 4, but a little bit of that kind of like young Kirk. Like if you watch when they redid Star Trek with
Chris Pine,
Chris Pine and
Zachary Quinto.
Yeah, Zachary Quinto playing Spock. That's who he kind of reminds me of. He kind of reminds me of that era of Kirk.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Ronaldo's got a couple of interesting things. So first of all, he says in that treatment it was spelled Qi'ra. Exactly.
Yep.
So that was pretty cool. He said this relationship was well written. I totally agree. I mean,
Absolutely.
through this whole film, that the whole relationship between Han and Qi'ra was just so good. And then, of course, it makes sense for Han to have a life like this. Absolutely. And I think that was something that maybe we overlook, and I actually wish they had spent more time on Corellia, to be honest. If you're gonna
I thought we were, honestly.
I know.
I definitely see why they made the choices they did as well.
Sure. And then, of course, he says, for me personally, when I see a character when she is younger, I don't want to see that same character with the same personality. Show me how the character was before. Show me how they changed. Now, I totally agree with that. The only thing that I would say, or that I would add to this, is that, yes, you do have to do this. You do not want to see a younger version of a character and have them be a carbon copy of, you don't want to see somebody in their 20s and they're exactly how they were in their 40s, right? Because
there's no growth.
And
that's not reality.
And that's not reality.
In theory, none of us should be the same way we were when we were younger.
Well, we hope not.
That's what I'm saying. In theory,
But here's the point, though. The point that I'm trying to make here is that you can't go too far the other way. You have to have some characteristics, because look, I'm 52 years old. I guarantee, you've known me for at least well, 20 years actually. It's been like a little over
More than
20 years.
Yeah, more
Well,
than
more
that.
technically. I think it was like, what,
Well, yeah.
98, 99, somewhere in there?
Yep.
Yeah. So there you go. Well, that's a good thing. I mean, sure, has there been growth and all that stuff? Go ahead and lie and say
Yeah.
yes. But I mean, the point is,
Yeah.
if you go back to when I was like 30, I mean, I'm still basically the same guy. You know, I just
Sure.
have hopefully a little bit more wisdom and maturity, you know, it's just, but the personality wise, same. And if you went back to me in my 20s, it's probably a little bit more annoying and obnoxious, but still the same. And that's where I think they really strike that balance with Alden Ehrenreich, is that
Mm-hmm.
you see a lot of the things in Han Solo that you see in the Harrison Ford portrayal, but you see it in an unrefined way. And
Yeah,
I think that's
definitely.
great. Let me just get to this other one with Ronaldo here. Whoops, wrong button. Sorry, guys. Fun fact: Chris Pine's interpretation of Kirk was based on Han Solo. I could see that.
Oh, it's a big circle I see, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I could totally see that. You know, because again, and this is one of those things, and I can't stress this enough, is the fact that one of the reasons why I think the relationship between Han and Qi'ra works so well is because as individual characters, they're developed. They're very much developed. I mean, you see who these people are right out the gate. And, you know, with that whole speeder chase that you get, you know, you see how Han is good at piloting things. Like, you see that, and that whole daredevil, you know, yeah, I can make it kind of thing that he pretty much does. But of course, by the time he's the Harrison Ford version, now he has experience. Now he has some experience and wisdom, and he knows. And I thought that that's something that the Alden Ehrenreich version captured too, was the fact that he has that enthusiasm and that cocky swagger kind of thing, but he's still a little unsure of himself, and he doesn't have that much experience yet. So
Yeah, it's kind of like being we often compare it to being like an athlete, you know, who's naturally gifted.
mm-hmm.
And I think that's what he was more or less relying on, was the fact that he had the natural ability and gift to be a great pilot.
Right.
It's only until, like, you know, you've had some coaching or some experiences and been in situations till you really start to develop and smooth out those rough edges where you truly know what you can do and what you can't do.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's the Harrison Ford version we kind of get, because, you know, this Alden Ehrenreich is kind of like, whatever, we'll make it work type thing. Episode 4, you know, he was like, I'm not attacking that battle station. That's more like suicide. Like, are you crazy?
Yeah,
Like,
right.
you know, he has a healthy respect for certain things at
He
this
has
point.
more restraint.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that that's important too. But here's something else that we can look at, and I'm sure we'll cover this more in when we do the Force Awakens in a couple of weeks. But the 70-year-old version of Han is still kind of the same Han. You know, again, he's
Yeah.
you know, there's a really good, and that's one of the things, for as much as Harrison Ford likes to pick on the fact that he feels that Han Solo is a two-dimensional character, and although he doesn't hate Han Solo, for him, there's just not that much there for him to sink his teeth into. And that's why, I mean, if I could, I would love to get Harrison on this show, although it would be super
Wouldn't we?
awkward. It would be really awkward. He's kind of awkward in interviews, and we would have that somewhat starstruckness kind of thing going, and you wouldn't want to make him hang up. I mean, if he was in the studio with you, you'd have to walk off. But I mean, you know, if he just kind of came in remotely, you know, it's sort of like you can just pull the plug at any point. There's nothing we can do. But what I would love to do, if I had the opportunity for us to interview him, is to show him how Han Solo really is a multidimensional character. And a lot of that is present in this movie, actually.
Yeah.
And so a lot of that comes from his hometown, you know. Corellia, we've known from the expanded universe that it's a little dismal, and it's kind of a, it's like a shipbuilding type of a economy, essentially.
It's very industrial
Very
in Corellia.
industrial. And it almost has like an English vibe to it, right? Like some of the
Kind of
shots
reminds
in
me
this
of
film,
Gotham.
a little Gotham, but a little London. Like I get some London
Yeah.
vibes, like a futuristic London or something from this thing. And I just think that, again, if I had any criticism about this part, and look, I understand that they had to move on. And honestly, I think the pacing of this movie was really, really good. They slowed down when they needed to. They picked up the pace when they needed to. I really honestly think that this is a well-paced film, which
Yeah.
is something that I definitely picked up on when rewatching it last night. But if I had a little criticism, and again, it's very minor, but if I did, I wish they had spent more time on Corellia. Corellia is like, I would have liked to see more of him developing in that, right? Because now he's got that Aladdin thing going, where he's kind of like the street criminal,
Hmm.
working for Lady Proxima, and there's story there. Like you could actually have made a whole film based on that if you'd wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, I think in this space, yeah, I would have loved to see more of his um I don't want to say upbringing, but I guess kind of what made him so cocky, what made him so,
Right. How did he get to where he
have
was
that
at? Yeah.
yeah, how did he get to, that swagger almost, you know what I mean? This
Mm-hmm.
and
And
I
again, I
think
don't.
that's yeah.
No, I mean, I don't, and I agree with you. I don't necessarily think we need the Anakin thing where we see him at 9 years old or something.
Right. No, we
you
don't need that. It
know,
don't go too far the other way either, right?
right, right. Here he is as a 5-year-old. It's like his, I mean, I don't really need that. But, at the same time, I think that it would be good if they just had, like you said, maybe another couple of scenes where you get to see a little bit of that development. Ronaldo says, yeah, I like the dirty industrial look of Corellia. Hopefully we'll see it in future projects. Well, if they make Solo 2 happen, we could see it. Now, another thing that I liked right out the gate, the speeder chases that they've been doing I think they've been really cool. They're really exciting. It's something a little bit different, right? Because it's the classic car chase scene, but done Star Wars style. And again,
Right.
there's that genre thing again, right? So they're taking a typical story trope that they'll have in action movies, and they're making a Star Wars version of it. It's a stroke of genius. We really hadn't seen that much before. And kind of along those lines, hang on, let me get this one from Ronaldo. He says, wasn't Han going to appear in episode 3 originally? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's funny. At first I thought that was a rumor, but it turned out that was confirmed. It didn't go as far as like there's no deleted scenes or anything like that, but they were going to put a young Han Solo in there because they had a young Boba Fett in episode 2. So yes, they were going to introduce Han Solo in episode 3.
I mean, even in 3 though, we did in that shot, you did see the Falcon.
Yes, you did. We did not point that out when we
covered
it. Yeah, we
Revenge
covered
of
it
Sith, yeah.
last week actually. So to that end, though, now we see the dice, the infamous dice. This is,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. The idea was this was somewhere in the original trilogy, right? I mean, was it one of the things hanging in the Falcon? Do you remember?
Apparently, but I don't recall ever seeing him.
I don't. And suddenly,
I didn't see it until the prequel. I mean, not the prequels, the sequels.
Sequels,
That's
right?
That's the first time I've ever heard about. Because I mean, it's like the car thing, people hang the dice in their cars, and I get it, but to me, that just seemed a little weird, out place in Star Wars to me.
Yeah, and here's the thing that was really crazy to me, is in the sequel trilogy, it suddenly became this big deal.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it was like Luke had him, he's giving him to Leia, and it's like, what? I don't even know what this is. And now, in typical Disney fashion, it's like, well, here's what we can do. We'll retcon it now, and we'll stick them in the Solo origin story, and then we'll make it like, see, they are important. It's like, no, what you're doing is you're covering from some stupid. I mean, what it probably was something really dumb where they saw it in some scene and I got to go back and watch episodes 4, 5, and 6 just to see if I even see the stupid things. Like, I'm not even convinced they were really there. But
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was a little bit of a, like, what is the deal with this? That's why I had to put that in the discussion today, because to me, again, that was a total retcon thing. And it's like, again, with the dice. And it would be one thing if it was just, okay, we're going to show them, like, in this scene here, right? I'm sorry, I'm pointing the wrong way. We'll show them in this scene where it's like, yeah, oh, look, the dice. But, you know, Qi'ra later in the film's, like, handing into, I'm like, it's like, okay, guys, I get it. Now, Ronaldo, of course, as is his job, he's setting us straight a little. He says the dice are there in the original trilogy, but you really have to look for it. All right, so it's an Easter egg thing, and he said they look cool though, and they do. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, they look cool, and it's not like I have a problem with the dice per se, like by themselves. I just think that
they made a big deal about it when there wasn't a big deal in the original trilogy, right?
To Han at all. It's never like
right.
you said,
But
oh,
I
my
can
dice.
see you're right. I can see if it's like, hey, we can't take off yet. I got to get my lucky dice. That would make sense.
You know what it would be
But
similar
there was
to?
no reference. It's
Exactly.
almost like
Indiana Jones. Look at Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark, the first scene, when he rolls under that wall and his hat falls off, and he rolls back, grabs his hat. Okay, they establish right from the get-go, yes, this hat is important. It's part of the character, and it becomes an iconic part of the character.
Sure. Like, you see that hat and bullwhip, you automatically know that's Indiana Jones. I mean,
Right.
it's just like Pirates of the Caribbean. You know, Jack Sparrow was always like, my personal effects, please, and my hat. Like, he always wanted he always kept talking about his name being Captain. Like Captain Jack, he always hated being called Mister. It was Captain Jack Sparrow. He wanted his hat and his gun with one shot and his sword or whatever. But that was, yeah. And had they made a big deal about that with Han, I'm with it. But yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, the fact that they just started all of a sudden focusing on this, like it
all
was
of a sudden it's this
major
big deal.
part of the
it's a major part of the thing, right? It's like this major thing, and that's the problem that I have. Like, it would have been better if they had been talking about his gun or his vest, which even Lando wore at one point. You know, it's like,
went from the cape room to the vest room.
Right. So obviously, they're trying to run. They got this coaxium. They're trying to do their thing, which I thought was cool. And again, I have to say, while we're at this point, if you take the overall plot of Solo, I actually really like the way it lays out. Again, there's a lot of revelations that I had last night, honestly. I'm so glad that I rewatched the movie fresh before reviewing this thing, because there are so many different insights and everything that I got from this viewing. And that's another thing, is that when you really look at the plot of Solo, it flows really well. I mean, sure, there's some things, and we're going to get into it, where it's like, okay, guys, really? They're cramming in little fan service things. Little shoehorning going on, where it's like, all right, yeah, we get it. But even that did not totally detract from the film, in my opinion anyway. You guys might feel different. And if you do, let us know. And, also hit the like button, subscribe. You guys know the drill. So they finally are about to be free. And, of course, they grab Qi'ra and they get separated. Now, of course, this is a plot device for two reasons. Number one, this is where Han makes that promise. Yes, I'm going to come back for you. And I thought it was good, by the way, that we saw Han actually, because the way that he was Leia was really his true love, I guess, but
Mm-hmm.
it was a different vibe, you know? They were kind of like,
Mm.
you know, going at each other a little bit, you know, a little sniping and stuff. This is more that traditional romance kind of thing. You know, it's a young romance. This is how you would
Yeah.
be when you're 22 or whatever,
Yep.
you
Young
know?
and in love.
Young and in love. So it was nice to see that being done for Han Solo. But the flip side of this is they had to separate Qi'ra because now Kira's going to be going on a different path. So right now, anyway, we see that both of them really wanted to just leave together and, you know, have a life together or whatever. Han's whole thing is like, look, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get enough money together to get everything together. I'm going to come back and I'm going to get you and we're going to go off and we're going to live this life. Right now,
Right.
she's thinking the same thing. The problem is she's got to deal with a little bit of legal trouble. And that's another thing that I wonder too, because, you know, obviously the next time we see her is what turns out to be the whole Crimson Dawn thing. But it's like, to me, while I think that was effective, somebody needs to fill that in. You know, it's like, because when we last leave you being dragged away by stormtroopers and presumably back to Lady Proxima, it's like, okay, now all of a sudden you're like Dryden Voss's number 2 guy. So I
How
need,
do we get here?
yeah, I need to see the steps, or at least the broad strokes, you know? I mean, I can't just, but again, it's called Solo, not Qi'ra. So I understand that. So I thought this was a really important point. Yeah, anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole Han's promising. You know, one of the cool things about Han is the fact that when we meet him in 4, he doesn't seem to care about much. You know,
Right.
you're not used to seeing like it's not until episode 5, Empire Strikes Back, where you start to see like, okay, at the very beginning, he's kind of concerned about Leia's well being. You know, he felt kind of a way that she wouldn't miss him as like, yeah, you're a great pilot. You're a great leader. You know, he was like, no, it's more to it than that. You just don't want to admit it. That's where you finally start to see like Han has feelings and he's really, and you see that over time. Like, okay, Return of the Jedi. We talked about that when we covered Return of the Jedi in Empire, where he was like, you know, freaking out about the whole Luke thing.
Mm-hmm.
But here, you know, we really get to see like him truly fighting for love. Like that's something you've never seen from Han really like that before.
Yeah,
So I
well,
thought that this
honestly,
whole Han's promise thing, like the fact that he's feeling this way, it kind of reminds me of and I was taking some notes. It kind of reminds me of um the James Bond series with Daniel Craig, because you kind of saw that James kind of fell in love and he was like, okay, yeah, I can't do that anymore. So he kind of just kept that at bay, but he always had that special place in his heart for Vesper.
mm-hmm.
And so, like, that's what this kind of reminded me of. Like, this depiction of Han was like, okay, he was in love, and then he kind of just had to, he kept trying to get back to it. And then after a while, I could see him just like not focusing on love, just going on his adventure, making money, making his way around the galaxy, just doing his thing. And then, of course, he runs into Leia, and now he had no idea, like, that would end up being his wife. And,
Well, I think
you
it's
know,
like you said, you know, and we'll get into more of the why a little bit later into this, but
hmm
he switches focus from that idealistic, I want to just live happily ever, you know, happily ever after with my girlfriend, and more into career, being a smuggler.
yeah,
And
being a smuggler, yeah.
what ends up happening is, I think you're right. I think that Leia was the first person since Qi'ra to
hmm
kind of make him go, you know, maybe there's a little bit more to life than this.
Yeah, I
It-
thought, you know, that part of me was gone, you know, and
right.
that's the thing is he didn't expect that, because even he was like, you know, you think you're a princess and a guy like me, you know, it was just kind of like, at first he kind of did seem like it was like a flirtatious thing, like, all right, you know, almost like one of his many women or something like that.
One and
Hey,
done,
I might be able to
baby.
make.
One and
Yeah,
done.
exactly, exactly. But then it's just like by 5, you're starting to see like, no, you care, dude. Like you
Yeah.
really, you know what I mean? And then you see the growth of that, and you're like, okay,
That's why
Han is
I
changing
was
again.
I even said in when we did Empire, man, that was one of my favorite aspects of Empire. And it was one of the most unexpected because Han wasn't the type of person you would expect to do that, you know? And I mean, the way, because he would have all these like kind of mushy feelings or whatever, but then he hated himself. I mean, the whole dynamic with that Luke or Han and Leia
Yeah,
love
triangle.
thing, yeah, well, it wasn't even a triangle unless you count Luke, although, you know, the brother, but we'll just kind of move past that. The thing that's really funny to me is I think that this is precisely why people were critical of Alden Ehrenreich. And it wasn't him. It was, this is where Han is at this point in his life. They're like, well, it doesn't
Right.
feel like Han Solo. It's because he's not there yet. He's not the Han
He's
Solo
not
you
that
knew.
guy yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh-oh. You know who's making his appearance? Take a guess.
David?
No.
Or okay. This Ronaldo, he's already here.
No, man.
Dwight?
Nope. We got the Chad feed.
Oh,
Our boy Chad. Chad's in. Says, I'm not ready for Solo. I didn't even finish it.
come on, Chad. What are you doing?
Chad. Dude. Well, here's the thing, though. You can watch and you can learn about it now, and then when you go back and watch it, you can think of all the things that we said. And hit the like button, Chad. There's a like already, so I know it wasn't you.
Well, he probably won't because you didn't play Tool today, but
No, that's true. It's true, but I couldn't. The bass wasn't right. Chad's like, I'm listening. All right, Frasier. I want you to listen and like, Chad. I want to see. There we go. See, there it is. This is how we roll on this YouTube channel. We just shame people into liking us. But yeah, this is basically how I think people just tend to overlook the fact that Solo wasn't the Harrison Ford version yet. And a lot of what they blame Alden Ehrenreich, well, he wasn't Solo enough. It's because Solo wasn't Solo enough. You know, I mean, this is where he was at. All right, and speaking of which, now we can get this out of the way, because here's the thing that I have to say that upon repeat viewing, right, last night when I saw this, this bothered me less than it did when I first saw it in the film. And that's when Han gets his last name. You know, where it's just kind of like, Han, Solo. You know, he says it all slow and all this stuff. But really, I started thinking about how cool this actually is, because
he was traveling solo.
Yeah, he was traveling, and the Imperial officer guy, you know, he's just like, I don't know what to do. And he's just like, yeah, all right, you're traveling solo. Yeah, there you go. And now, I mean, not to be revisionist here, but I actually appreciate this scene where I did not before.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of funny, and it's something Han would do. So I could, you know.
Well, it wasn't even Han.
Like something.
See, that I would have appreciated if the guy had said, and this is what I had said at the beginning of the thing, right? If the Imperial officer had said, okay, name Han, and he was like, well, all right, last name or whatever. If Han was the one that went, Solo, that would have been, I think at the time that would have made more sense to me. The fact that it was Imperial officer, but if you think about it, it's like this poor guy probably just wants to get, you know, look, I need to get this guy moving. Get the line moving. It's just like, Han, yeah, whatever, all right, Solo. That actually makes more sense. That to me actually makes more sense now. And I was cracking up during this scene. And I also had to take this moment too to just point out the fact that another thing that hit me about this film, and this is a good example, but there are others, the humor in this.
Oh yeah.
The humor in this particular Star Wars movie was perfect Star Wars humor, in my opinion. So Ronaldo chats in. I mean, the Imperial officer couldn't care less about Han's second name, so it makes sense. You know, he just said the first thing that came to his mind, and that's exactly the point. It's like it's just like, you know what, whatever. You know, I don't even care. Next. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then we get to something that I think was really neat, and that is the Battle of Mimban. Now, I always kept forgetting the name of this stupid planet. And but I will say this. First of all, I think a couple of things here. One, I was really happy that they went into Han's Imperial service, because that was always a well-known thing, that he was an Imperial officer at one point. And then, you know, he left, obviously, and went into a life of smuggling. And I really think that the way that they came up with the story, which we'll get into as we go on, was just absolutely brilliant, in my opinion. But this is actually one of the grittiest, insane battle scenes. It's so overlooked.
This is what you think Rogue One would be.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, I honestly think that this is one of the best battle scenes in the entire franchise. And it does. It shows you that chaotic nature of a real battlefield, you know? And here's the
all gray and the gun smoke and man.
Right, it's got that like World War I vibe, like Dunkirk, or, well, I think that was that one or that two? That was one. I mean, no, I think it was.
It kind of has a Saving Private Ryan vibe to it as well.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, exactly. You know, it just had, and again, it also shows that the Empire is struggling. You know, every other depiction of when they're going to take over, they just show up in force and obliterate everybody, and there's no real challenge. I mean, other than unless you count some of the rebellion fights. But this is them actually having to, pardon the pun, soldier on, you know, take a city or whatever, and they're not just mowing over these guys. I mean, they're losing people. It's chaos. I mean, I thought that was just fantastic. You know, so I think that was a really cool thing. All right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I mean, I thought it was cool. Like, you're seeing like the walkers and stuff getting dropped off by these ships. I mean, like, the whole look of it was just sweet to me.
The whole look of it was cool. And that's the thing I cannot state enough, is that there's a lot of times in this movie that I thought,
in this.
Yeah. You know, just some of the scenery, some of the, you know, just overall looks of different things. I really think that it was spot on. I can say without any hesitation that this is by far, if not the most, one of the most underrated Star Wars films.
I would agree with that.
Because I think people overlook it just because of where it's sat, you know? And now we get to meet Tobias Beckett. This is a character that I really liked when I saw the film. I love this guy now. I mean, first of all, you had to give, like, how does Han sort of become Han in the amount of time that he has? Because this is another problem that they had, right? They had to figure out Han's got to be sort of who he is by episode 4. That's only maybe 10 years away from this film. So there had to be an influence. And enter Beckett. Beckett is the unscrupulous version of Han Solo. And I think that, of course, by the end of the film, this is corroborated and everything. I think this is what makes it so brilliant, is Han actually adopted a lot of the, the skill with the blaster, the swagger, just the fact that, just kind of the overall demeanor that this guy has, but without the betrayal, the total selfishness. He kind of tries to do that a little bit. And that we see that in episode 4, where he's just like, all I care about is the money, whatever, whatever. But he is who he is. And they kept saying this over and over. No, Han, you're actually a good guy. You want to be like this ruthless smuggler guy, but this is not who you are.
Right.
And Ronaldo even says it. Beckett was Han Solo before Han Solo. And I mean, Woody Harrelson just plays the crap out of this character. I mean,
yeah,
he was so
he did a phenomenal
good.
Job.
So good, yeah, as this guy. That, I mean, I would have been fine seeing a Beckett standalone film. If they came out with like a novel about Beckett and his adventures, I would check it out. I mean, I really, really thought that this was a very well-written, very cool character. And then, of course, we get... I'm a little softer on this scene now than I was, because you did have to have Han Solo meeting Chewbacca, and I did think that this was kind of a cool way to do it, where it wasn't like your typical thing.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of because we do know that the Wookiees were enslaved. We knew that Chewbacca was himself enslaved by the Empire, and I think that they did a really good job. I'm sure it was Lord and Miller, because Lord and Miller were sort of super Star Wars fans as well. But so's Ron Howard, so it's really difficult to know. And of course, it was this... I know that Lawrence Kasdan participated, but I think it was his son that mostly wrote this. I think his son wrote this by himself, actually.
Jonathan.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that it was cool that they were taking some of the, pretty much, I don't want to really say expanded universe, because it is canon, but some of the outlying stories, some of the background stuff, and incorporating it in a really cool way, I thought, in this. And they did a really good job where, basically Han Solo takes off because Beckett told him, they were going through that incredible, crazy battle on Mimban, and Han basically shows a little bit of, I think, his later brilliance in the fact that he used a little bit of detective work to figure out that Beckett wasn't an Imperial officer. But what was funny, in typical Han fashion, because every time Han tries to do something, it backfires, he basically was trying to blackmail Beckett into, taking off or whatever, and Beckett turns it around on him.
Yep.
And that's the thing. Beckett was always one step ahead of Han until the end, which was very, very satisfying. So here, he's pretty much like thrown in a pit where there's this quote-unquote hungry beast, and it ends up being Chewbacca. So what did you think of this whole scene?
Well, I thought it was really cool, especially like when Han started speaking, Wookiees. I was just like,
Shriwook.
Whoa. Or Shriwook. What did I say? Wookiees? Yeah.
Yeah.
Shriwook, yeah. I don't know where that came from. But yeah, when he started speaking, the native tongue of the Wookiees. And I thought that was just like, okay, well, this is cool. And it kind of explains the whole life debt thing. It's like, okay, now you kind of see why they're so close. It's like, okay, well, basically Han freed him from a whole life of basically, because I think it was like either he was going to be killed by, either Han was going to get killed or they were going to kill Chewbacca. It was just kind of like, you guys figure, it's almost kind of like that whole Joker scene. It's like, now we're going to have tryouts. He's basically kind of like, all right, whoever comes out of this, but if you do nothing, then all right, we'll just kill both of you, basically. So Yeah, so just the fact that he was able to kind of talk to him and how, of course, Han is getting the crap kicked out of him at first by Chewbacca, but then, him being
Oh
able to.
man, there's a couple of shots in there that I'm like, how did he even survive that?
That's what I'm saying, man. I'm just
You
like,
know,
dude,
like
Han is tougher than you think.
that's a
Because, like,
brutal battle, dude. Brutal.
yeah. So I thought it was kind of, it was funny, but kind of cool and heartwarming at the same time.
Well, and again, I mean, I think it was really cool too that they finally do escape, and you know, it was a situation where Han, of course, kept saying, no, my friends, I'm gonna, and they finally run to try to catch the ship, and it's interesting because Beckett and his crew would not have stopped if it hadn't been for the fact that Chewbacca was with them, and they figured they could use the Wookiee muscle, which I also thought was
Hmm.
pretty ironic.
Yeah.
And of course, Ronaldo points out that Chewie was about to eat him, which
Yeah.
we know that Chewie has an
Yeah. He
appetite.
loves, definitely. Those porks going.
But then there's that shower scene, though.
Yeah. That's.
I mean, it's all like, especially when it started out, Han's legs are there, and then Chewbacca comes in. I remember when I first saw this movie, I'm like,
I didn't know what happened.
whoa,
Like, I was
where
like,
are we
man,
going? Where are we going?
exactly. It was getting a little weird for me.
It's like, ooh, I don't know if I like the direction they're taking this. I might have to close my eyes or something.
Yeah, I'm about to walk out the theater. It's more
And
like.
yeah, it's just like, no, guys, I can't handle this. And who knows? Maybe that was one of the things Lord Miller wanted to do that Kathleen Kennedy's like, nope.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah, like, guys, it's still a
yeah, it's like, let's
for a
not
kids
alienate
movie.
every fan. Yeah, exactly. Ronaldo says that was weird, but I laughed. I mean, and it was kind of funny because Chewbacca just, it's like, whatever. I mean, and that was, I think, the comedy of it. But then, of course, after that, and that was what was cool too, was the fact that you had this idea that his whole deal was like, look, I just want to do this one job, make a ton of money, and get back to Corellia to Qi'ra. And obviously, Chewbacca was wrapped up in this. Han wasn't necessarily feeling that, hey, you're going to be my partner for life thing yet. And so his whole thing was like, okay, look, we all need you on this job. Just do this one job, and then you can go your way and do whatever you want. And Han was still thinking a little selfishly on this one, right? Like, well, we need you to do this one job with us. And once you do it, then we're good. And it was also how Han was naively just constantly thinking that they're just going to pull off this one job, he'd get his money and go. I mean, he's not thinking that he's going to get ripped off in any way. He's not thinking of any of that stuff because, again, he's idealistic and a little naive.
No experience, right?
No experience. And I thought that was a really good way, ultimately anyway, that they really took care of this. And then there's that whole like campfire scene. I really like this scene a lot. This is where the movie slows down a little bit. They're about to, it's like the night before they're going to pull off this train heist, which, that's really cool. We'll talk about that in a second. But I really like the fact that they started name dropping stuff, right? Like, I mean, later on, they name drop Aura Singh, and you find out Beckett's the one that killed her. But here, they're like, well, why are we getting these guys? Why don't we get, like, Bosk or somebody, And I was like, yes. I really enjoyed that. And again, it sounds like that's fan service, but the reality is this is stuff that's just tying in that greater universe.
I would say, plus it fits. I mean, like, like it fits in that space, that world, these characters.
Yeah.
Like, bounty hunters and, hey, like you're dealing with the underworld, so it makes sense that they would know these people and have some sort of relationship or dealings with them.
Well, that's why I was really looking forward to a Solo too, because that I thought could have delivered where the Book of Boba Fett failed. And that is, you could see, well, part of that is because during the time of Solo, all this stuff was in the prime, right? So you could see essentially a crime drama where you deal with Crimson Dawn, the Hutts, Black Sun, all this stuff. You can really, really get into this. And man, there'd be a lot of cool stories that you could endlessly go on with films about that, I think. But what's cool is also during the scene, I mean, did you have anything else you wanted to say about that?
Well, I was just gonna say, and that was one point where George Lucas, he had a TV show where he was actually just gonna deal with the underbelly. What's it called? It was like
13
1330
13
or
13 13
I
I
think
think it
13.
was.
Yeah, and he was trying to, show like the seedy underworld of Coruscant, where you find, your bounty hunters, your smugglers, your, death stick dealers, and everything else under there.
Yeah. And I mean, that would have been a really cool show. But what I really like about this fact is that, then of course, Beckett, they're talking, they're guessing, oh, he must be, trying to impress a girl or whatever, and, giving him a bunch of crap. And it's funny because Han really was he really was like the inexperienced little pup in this whole thing. And
Yeah.
I mean, it was so obvious. I mean, that's the thing that was so funny. We're so used to Han being kind of that seasoned, what me worry.
Veteran.
Yeah, veteran smuggler, and he wasn't at this point. Ronaldo says it was Star Wars Underworld. 1313 was the game. That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Yep. Yeah, Star Wars Underworld. But during this scene, too, this is where Han gets his blaster. And I thought that it was really cool that, Beckett kind of took apart like his rifle or something and then turned it into the I can never remember, like D30, DS34, whatever the blaster
the model.
Yeah, Han's iconic blaster. I'm sure Ronaldo's going to text it in like 2 minutes, but DL34 maybe? I don't know, something like that. But I really thought that it was cool that you did see on display Han's inexperience compared to these other guys. Because I think that it's important to point that out, because it explains a lot of his actions. Remember, he's motivated purely by getting back with Qi'ra. Get enough money together, get a ship, and get back to Qi'ra so they can fly off into the sunset or whatever.
DL44, by the way.
DL44, yes. Hey, you beat him to it. That's good. That's good. See? It's like, if only we had these little things that we can look stuff up. So, I thought that was pretty cool. And then, of course, we get to that epic train heist. I mean, they had planned this thing, and the idea is that there's just a crazy amount of coaxium on this thing. And, of course, at this point in the film, Han does not
robbing
know.
the Empire.
Well, they are, yeah, but so they're robbing the Empire, but he doesn't really know that this shipment is for Crimson Dawn yet.
Right.
He doesn't really know. He just thinks that this is like some independent thing. And we should take a moment to talk about the crew, too. The one dude really reminded me of the Fox character in Guardians of the Galaxy. The multi-arm pilot guy.
Oh, reminds you of Rocket Raccoon?
Yes. I mean, from the way he talked to just his general character and the jokes he was making, I mean, it was a little close. Now, I don't know who influenced who. They're part of the same company, but it does bear pointing out. But I have to say, the train heist thing was cool. It also shows, again, Star Wars genre films. You could do this. You can make a heist movie, like an Ocean's 11 kind of thing. Or an Italian Job. Something like that. You can do that in the Star Wars universe, and this is proof.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've seen it in Solo and Book of Boba Fett, because with the the whole Tusken Raiders thing.
Right? Yeah, I often said that scene in the Book of Boba Fett totally reminded me of this. But this came first, and it was really cool, and Beckett had a loss. He lost, I forgot what the name of the woman that was with him. But she ends up dying. The pilot guy ends up dying. But again, it was satisfying. I didn't feel that these characters were throwaway characters. In fact, again, if I had a small criticism, it would be that we didn't get to see more of them. I mean, I understand that they were filling like a plot device, but it would have been nice, I think, to see a little bit more of Beckett and his crew. And, you could definitely have something based on that. And of course, they're thwarted because they start talking about Enfys Nest. Now, at first, when I first heard that name, I thought that was just a name of another group, like the Pikes or something like that. But it turned out that Enfys Nest was this person.
Yep.
And, again, this is yet another character that they introduce in Solo that it's like, wow, this is...
Kind of reminds me of what's her name from
Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, Poe's ex-love.
Yeah, I know. I can never remember, and it's like a real simple name too.
It is.
You're looking it up, aren't you?
Yes, I
am. Yeah, I kind of figured. It's like a simple. I don't know why I can never remember the chick's name. I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm a guy. Well, you're right, though. And actually, if you look closely at that helmet, if you take those little side wings off, it looks like Kylo Ren's. I mean, really look at it. Yeah. Like, just imagine it without those side wings. Totally looks like Kylo Ren. But I just thought, again, this is another example of really cool characters that they're coming up with in Solo.
Zori Bliss.
Zori Bliss, that's it. And yeah, she did kind of have that same vibe. Because we find out later that Enfys Nest is actually a woman. But right now, she's framed up as a villain. Right now, at this point in the story, we just think of her as like another smuggler, pirate kind of thing that's out to steal the shipment too, and just taking advantage of the opportunity. And again, this is what I think Solo does really brilliantly. What it does is it gives you one impression, and then it completely flips it around. And they do this at least 2 or 3 times in this movie. And this is one of them.
Oh, yeah.
You think Beckett, okay, granted, he's not exactly law enforcement, but you figure, okay, he's just trying to steal this shipment or whatever, and along comes these opportunist pirates that figure, hey, I'm going to just take it for myself. And, of course, that's not really the case, but we're going to find out later. But I really thought that Enfys Nest was just a really, really interesting character. And this movie is full of them. And you wonder, given the quality of Rogue One and the quality of Solo, what happened with the saga films?
Yeah. You gotta wonder a lot of times just some of the decisions that are made over at Disney. Number one, just yeah. I mean, you brings. I mean, it's they constantly for whatever reason, even in especially with the Star Wars franchise, they bring characters in and they really they kind of hype them up or they give them a cool look, and then you don't see them anymore. And it's like you're just wasting stuff like
talking Phasma. To you, Phasma. Yep,
exactly. Phasma. Who's the other one? We just said it on the other show, but it was like another character. Like,
oh, you're right. Yeah, you're right. We did.
Man.
Yeah, because when we mentioned that character, I was thinking of Phasma. When I'm like, oh, that's like another version of it. Yeah, where they look like totally cool.
Do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I mean, They kind of did it with Boba Fett a little bit, honestly, because really you only see Boba Fett and Empire for that split second. Well, you kind of saw him off and on in Empire, but you didn't know anything about him. You just knew he was a bounty hunter.
Well, I think they were
And then
keeping
you see the next
him.
thing
He was kind of
you see,
mysterious. I don't know if he was underutilized.
yeah, but I mean, if he's like the best bounty hunter in the galaxy, like,
But I mean, they were only showing you a little bit. Like, you had a little bit of a window, into the galaxy. Like, this is what they were. Because remember, this is really the Skywalker saga, and that's why
true,
I was really excited about a lot of these standalones. Remember, the Boba Fett movie was supposed to be one of the next ones.
that's true.
And I honestly thought that they could actually have the freedom to then immerse yourselves into some of these other characters. You could flesh them out more, right? Because you see him coming in and out of the Skywalker saga, and you're like, oh, that's cool. I would have liked to have learned more about this person. Well, with the standalones, you can. It's too bad they actually stopped making them after Solo, because it would have been perfect. You wouldn't have had to try to shoehorn everything into the sequels, because you could just save the stuff
You
for,
have
yeah,
right, a standalone, right,
right.
exactly.
Unless you
Or if you
kill them
want to
off.
introduce them, or if you want to introduce them in a standalone where you can do more with them, so then when you put them into a saga film,
Right.
they're
The
already established,
opposite.
like a
Yeah.
Phasma, right? You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. No, that's totally true. All right. So basically, they lose the shipment. And then of course Beckett just like freaks out because he's like, you have no idea what you just done. You idiot.
Hmm.
This is actually for Crimson Dawn. Now we got to go see this guy,
Hmm.
Dryden Voss. But first, while they're about to meet him, Han and Qi'ra reconnect. So now we see like this totally different situation. It's like Han and Qi'ra now come back together. And again, I mean, I really thought the pacing was cool. I thought the way they brought them back together was cool. And then, of course, they have to go on the mission to get. I mean, it just, all the pieces fit really well to me.
I just want to say, man, the chemistry between Alden Ehrenreich and Amelia Clark, though.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and it's Amelia Clark. I mean, come on,
Well, yeah.
she's gorgeous, but it's just feeling that tension in the room between the two, because it's like Han's whole thing was like, okay, I got to get back to her, trying to get, and then he runs into, he's like, wait, how did why are you here?
Well,
It's
and that's
just
what
like,
was funny. She was like, "What are you doing?" He was like, "Well, I'm trying to make this deal so I can get back to you
to
on
you, but
Corellia."
you're already here,
Yeah.
right?
And then I think she
Where I
even
last
said, "Well,
left
here
you.
I am," or whatever, And I mean, I think what's funny is, because she alludes to it, right? She's like, "Well, things are a little different now," and what's funny about her is usually the cliched thing to do in these stories would be to have him still be all sprung on her, and then have her have moved on. But that's not really the case. She still has feelings for Han. It's just that in her current situation, being
She
like,
can't afford to.
like a top lieutenant at Crimson Dawn, it's like, yeah, man, that ship has sailed for me now. I'm part of this criminal empire, just having a relationship and going off and doing whatever.
It's almost like being in the Jedi Order at that point.
Yeah,
It's just kind of
yeah.
like, look, man, like my lifestyle does not support a relationship
That's
right
right.
now.
Attachments are forbidden. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, I mean, and you can feel that. She's
Yeah,
happy to see him, but at the same time, she's trying not to get too close because she doesn't want to drag him into all this and
yeah, and that's what I was
endanger
talking about.
him.
Like, yeah, the relationship between like them as the actors, but bringing that into their respective characters was just really, really good.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they, like you said, and the chemistry was very natural. It wasn't overdone. It felt organic. It felt real. Like, I felt like
Yeah.
I was watching two real people, in a relationship. It didn't feel like it was acting to me.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm sure Alden was kind of like, yeah, it wasn't acting for me. Or if it was, I'll just say it's really easy to get into character when I'm,
I hear that, brother.
he's the one that probably started Make Solo 2 happen.
He's like, yeah, I need some more of this.
Yeah, it's like, all right, next one. But now, of course, we meet Dryden Voss. And he was
freaky looking, man.
He was freaky looking. And again, usually, the challenge in a Star Wars film is you got to make a threatening villain who's not a Sith Lord, who's not wearing some creepy mask or something like that. And yet, they achieved that here. Dryden Voss was a legitimately threatening villain. You felt dread. You felt threatened when he was in a scene.
He reminds you like this almost a scarred up Italian mob boss. That's exactly what Dryden Voss was.
Well, I think that's what they were trying to do. I think that's where they were going.
Like, the whole look, the whole black suit, the hair, but he's got this fancy spread going on. I mean, it's definitely
that
like almost
was insane.
Man, that's what I'm saying. It's just like, okay. Even Han's looking around like, pretty nice in here, dude.
It's like they do a Godfather. It's like you find like a tauntaun's head in your bed or something. But yeah, right. And I mean, here he's basically like, and what was funny was, at first he was like all smiles, like, oh, I'm glad you're okay and all that. And it's like, oh, you know what? I'm going to have to kill you guys, I guess. I mean, it was just, It was so funny. And then, of course, Han speaking up going, no, wait, we can do this. We can get this shipment back. And it's kind of like, Qi'ra's just almost rolling her eyes like, oh, dude, you're making this worse. And Beckett, I think, was just at the point like, well, let's hear the kid out and see what he has to say, because I'm pretty much fresh out of ideas. And that's when they had the idea of going to the spice mines of Kessel, which, again, it was a natural way of putting this in the whole thing. Go to the spice mines of Kessel, which, of course, C-3PO references when he was afraid of being deactivated. And, obviously, the Kessel Run. But they got to go and try to get some unrefined coaxium. So, again, I thought that this plot moved in a very nice, linear, sort of adventurous way. It wasn't convoluted. It was just a very nice, concise plot that I thought moved. And now this is the next component of that story.
Yeah, I mean, getting to the Kessel Run, I mean, that's... we've always wanted to know what that is, because, he's always bragging about it. It's like, oh, yeah, I'm the one who made the Kessel Run, and,
12 parsecs.
There you go. So it's just kind of like, dude, okay, what the heck is the Kessel Run, and why is it so...
Well, it was kind of like, you're talking about when they bring it up in episode 4, obviously, and it was the same way, and this is what I thought was actually cool about Star Wars, but a little frustrating at the same time, is that they would just spit out these things like it's common knowledge.
Like we're supposed to know. Wars. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Like,
right.
Oh, well, you fought with my father during the Clone Wars, and we're kind of like, oh, yeah, right, of course. I mean, but what's that? Like,
heck is a Clone War?
That sounds like a big deal. Like, you put that out, like you were a general and you fought with, it's like, okay, right. This sounds like something we should probably know about.
First, you call him a general. First of all,
you're right.
So it's just like,
huh?
Like, okay, that's military. Why he's a Jedi? I'm confused.
The guy wouldn't even use a blaster. How's he a general? That's what you were thinking in episode 4. Like, what?
Right.
And this is kind of the same thing. Han's like, well, I made the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs. I'm like, okay, that would probably be a bigger deal to me if I knew what that was.
If I knew what exactly.
I don't even know what a parsec is.
Well, I thought it was almost like a race.
That's what I thought too.
Like a pod race or something like
the
that.
Cannonball
I didn't
Run,
know.
right? That's what I thought too. That's exactly what I thought it was. I thought it was like some race. I'm like, okay, cool. You go. But nobody knew. And again, that's the brilliance of Star Wars, because Lucas wanted it to feel familiar. And even though you didn't know what any of that meant, it still felt familiar to you. You just didn't know why. Well,
Yeah,
now they had the
exactly.
opportunity to go back and do this, right? So
We'll show you what that is, right?
yeah, we'll be doing that. And Ronaldo says you could tell that Paul Bettany was having fun.
Oh man, yeah. He definitely brought it as, Drayden Voss. That's why I was looking at his name. I was like, man, what is the guy's name again? But
well,
that's
here's
what it was.
here's
Paul
the thing that's really interesting to me about this. When you look at the way that he plays Vision in the Marvel films, and then you look at the way he's playing this character, and it's like
two completely night and day,
completely different things.
night and day,
and it just shows you, man. So
the acting range, just like you said with Woody Harrelson, playing Beckett, it's the same thing. It's like these guys can play these different types of characters, and you really believe that this is who they are.
Here's what's funny to me about that. And I felt this way back in the 90s when Woody Harrelson started doing more like action type roles. I'm like, Woody from Cheers? The little farm boy from Indiana that, like, and then he does like Natural Born Killers. I'm like, who is this guy?
Yep.
But it just shows you that range. And now he's playing a guy, he's playing, Tobias Beckett. Beckett's like this even more seasoned than what Han Solo became. And you're like, dude, Woody Harrelson is like an underrated actor.
Absolutely.
I'm just going to put that out there right now. And speaking of underrated actors, now you get Donald Glover as Lando. And I mean, he nailed this.
Yes.
Nailed this.
Remember we said this before, because at least I come on the record. Before, when they announced this movie and we said, well, who are they going to get to play Lando? You and I both were in the studio and we both said Donald Glover should be the one to play him.
And it's funny because, I was...
When they actually casted him, we were like...
Oh, yeah. Well, it's kind of like the Rosario Dawson thing, right? Yep. We had said that forever, that she should play Ahsoka. And then when it hit, we're like, sweet.
It's like the Star Wars gods listened.
But I mean, I love Community. That's just one of my favorite shows of all time. And
ATO.
Yes. And it just, Donald Glover just proves himself over and over. And this, what was cool too, again, and I can't stress this enough, I love the way that they brought all these different characters, both old and new, into this. Because they actually had him to where it's like, okay, they got to go to the spice mines of Kessel to get this unrefined coaxium. Okay, cool. So they're like, well, we need a fast ship to do this. And so Qi'ra's like, well, I know a guy. I'm not really sure how that's going to go. And then, of course, the guy she knows is Lando. And that's just a very organic, natural way to bring him into this. And, of course, Donald Glover, man, I mean, this whole Sabacc scene, both the Sabacc scenes, but this one...
Yeah, but this one, was hilarious.
This one was just so good and so funny. I mean, the humor in this was just completely hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. Like, that's what most people don't know about Donald Glover. I mean, he has like tremendous range in his act. Well, in just a lot of things, because people forget that he's Childish Gambino, the singer. So he's super talented, just as an individual. So, being able to sing, being able to write music, being able to act, and create these different characters. Like you said, from Community, he was on ATL.
Well, it's kind of funny, even if you just take Community itself, you have to have this crazy range because of all the different things that they were doing in it. It was just very challenging for those actors. So, absolutely. And of course, Ronaldo chats in, he says, Donald Glover was just epic. Totally buy him as Lando. And that's the important thing.
Yeah.
You
have to buy in.
Yeah, you got to buy in. You have to buy in, and it's a fine line. You could easily go the other way to where it becomes almost parody or a little cheesy or whatever. But again, and I think that Donald Glover did with Lando what Alden Ehrenreich did with Han Solo, and arguably even better. And that is, they showed this character, hey, this is what Lando was like before, right?
Right. I'm gonna ask you this question, and I'm gonna ask everybody else who may be watching. Who do you think nailed their respective characters better, Donald Glover or Alden Ehrenreich?
Donald Glover.
I mean, Donald out the gate.
I'm just gonna go with Donald because I think he captured it. I just think he captured it more. Now, again, this is not to discount Alden Ehrenreich at all, because actually, Alden Ehrenreich probably had the harder job. You know, not just because it was Harrison Ford, but because Han Solo, Harrison Ford as Han Solo was way more established. Like,
Yeah,
he
and
was in more scenes. He was more fleshed out as a character. He had all these books written about him. You knew that character inside and out.
yeah, I was just about to say, like, Han, and of course he's carrying the movie. I mean, it's as this person that had, like you said, has all this source material. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
Source material. So it's kind of like, very little was known about Lando for a while. So it was kind of like, all right. But Han, I mean, everybody wanted to know what was going on with him. So that's why I asked the question, like, okay, do you think, and I remember you said at the beginning of the movie, you hadn't quite bought him as Han. At this juncture in the movie, were you fully invested in him
Yeah,
as Han?
I was pretty invested. I think I was more fully invested more towards when they were at the spice mines of Kessel and dealing with all that. But yeah, I was there. I would say I was pretty much there at the Sabak game. Because it started being less foreign to me, and I started thinking of him as Han Solo at that point.
Okay.
And that's another thing why I think he's unfairly criticized too, because, Harrison Ford's been in a gazillion things as Han Solo, including the holiday special. Alden Ehrenreich's been in one film.
Well, yeah, but when you saw Donald Glover as Lando, you instantly bought it.
Oh, instantly. That's the reason why I give it to Donald Glover.
Okay.
Not to discount Alden Ehrenreich, and in fact, I'll be the first person to say that Alden Ehrenreich had the harder job by far. And he nailed it.
I agree with that.
I mean, if you go by like ratios, right, you could say that Alden Ehrenreich nailed it more because of what he was up against. But at the same time, yeah, I mean, that was Lando Calrissian to me. And it became almost the same thing as Ewan McGregor, where you now see Donald Glover more as Lando than you do even Billy D. Williams. Although, seeing Billy D. in Rise of Skywalker,
man, that
brought
was
warm feelings to my heart.
Indeed.
And of course, Ronaldo says Donald Glover, he's perfect. Not one to mince words, that Ronaldo. Now, here's the thing that bothered me tremendously when this movie first premiered, but then I got to see that it was different. And that was, we got our first SJW droid in L337, right? So
yes,
L3 kind of drove me insane when the first few times I saw this movie. I would cringe every time. It was, to me, this was the first time that Disney was trying to shoehorn a more modern agenda, and even if it wasn't necessarily like trying to follow an agenda, it was really more like trying to incorporate modern issues in a Star Wars film. Obviously.
Yeah, and it was obviously played by a woman. Phoebe Bridge was the voice of L3.
But I have to say that on this viewing, I actually found it kind of hilarious. And again, I think this is another Lord and Miller influence. Like, okay,
Yeah, I definitely thought
let's
this
put a
part was Lord and Miller.
let's put a Star Wars
Yeah.
droid in there, but let's have her like fighting for droid rights and you know, um every time Lando tells her to do something, she's like, "Oh, what? You think you can do that because my human master said?" I mean, it's a Lord and Miller type of a humor, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I could definitely see like in a Lego movie, like this fit that type
Yeah,
of humor definitely would fit in a Lego movie.
absolutely. And and again, that's why I say that I think last night was the first time I watched this film purely objectively. And that was just, to me, it was just hilarious. And she was a pretty good character, and I mean, even when she was like insinuating there was a relationship between her and Lando,
Yeah, that was a little weird.
it's a little weird.
But that's definitely another Lord and Miller thing.
Another Lord and Miller thing. And, Lando doesn't discriminate,
Right.
Lando, I guess, is the galaxy's first pansexual or whatever. Ronaldo says, actually, I like L3. I remember in an interview, Lucas said that everyone has rights in the Star Wars galaxy except for the droids, and hopefully it'll change, he said. And so, yeah, that could have been another reason, why maybe they put that in there, because it was based on some offhanded comment by Lucas. And then he goes on to say, so it makes sense to have a droid like that in that context. And absolutely. It's something that is somewhat of a stroke of genius to do something different, because it really is, and you brought this up, excuse me, it's really difficult to create new droid characters without it seeming derivative,
Yeah, that you know what? That is a very good point. Keep coming up with different, not just the look of them, but their function and their personality.
Yeah.
Like yeah, because you got like DO, R2D2, you got 3PO, you got BB-8, you know, L3, then you got K2SO. I mean, you got some droids who got, different personalities, different functions, but they almost seem like real people to you just because of the way they emote, or the way they the conversation that they have with the respective owners.
Yeah. Now Ronaldo brings up something that I think about every time I rewatch that film and see that scene. Is Ronaldo says, I wonder, how did L3 and Lando, make it work?
I'm going to say adapters.
Yeah.
That's going to be my answer.
That's exactly.
Got the HDMI to USB or something. I don't know.
Probably some sort of configuration.
Adapter.
Yeah, some adapter. Yeah. So, speaking of love between man and machine,
yes,
Han Solo meets the Falcon. And so
Yes.
begins a long-term love affair that continues on and on and on, and of course until Han's death. And I just think that this was a really cool moment, in my opinion.
Yeah, and to see the Falcon like pristine, it's not beat up yet.
Well, not only was it not beat up, it also didn't have that little notch in it. We
Yeah.
always thought that it came like that. It was really
Me
kind of
too.
weird to see it just, have that square, like,
It
no
was like
notch.
almost a square toe shoe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really weird to me to see it that way. And didn't it also have, I know later on, like in the sequels, they put like a square radar dish on it. I don't remember even seeing it last night. I didn't notice it, but I thought that the radar dish thing was a little different too. Or maybe it didn't even have one. I don't know. I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, I don't quite recall that part as far as the radar dish, but yeah, seeing the Falcon in its like in its glory, like it's just because like when you walk, because we're so used to seeing it all being beat up and dingy on the
Right,
inside and even on the
right.
outside, but like you go in this thing, man, it's like a lab or something. Like that thing is all
Oh, I
like
know. It's all pristine. And of course,
bright
keep
and
in mind
pretty.
that it's also the owner, right? I mean,
Yeah,
the
Lando too. Yeah,
Lando,
it's Lando's
he's
very particular.
very
Yeah,
much so. And he's very much into, just opulence and extravagance and all that
yep, and
stuff. So
making everything look good, man.
making everything look good. And of course, Ronaldo says, "Hey, the Falcon looked great in this beautiful scene." It was something that, again, they didn't overdo it. They could have made that really cheesy, but they didn't. And speaking, of course, because you did mention that, right? We also have Lando's infamous cape room.
Mm-hmm.
And Qi'ra at the time was trying on different capes, which I thought was actually kind of a cute scene.
Yeah, and that little tender moment they had in the little cape room.
And the whole thing. I mean, this is yet another point to where Qi'ra was trying to say, look, you don't know all the things I've done. You love what you knew of me then. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm still basically that person, but I've just done bad things and you don't realize that. And if you knew what I've done, that might change your opinion of me, kind of a thing. That's what she was trying to get
Kind of
across to him.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of Anakin, like a young Anakin.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I would go along with that as well. And then now we get to the spice mines of Kessel. Begins this whole ruse. I thought that was hilarious too. Like
Yeah.
just the whole scene. And really, everything about this I thought was really cool. They didn't drag this out either. That's another thing that I think they did right in Solo, where they dropped the ball a little bit in the prequels. Was that you didn't really get a scene dragging on too much in this, which I really appreciated.
Yeah, they definitely moved this along. Yeah, I think that's one of the pikes, if I'm not mistaken.
It is. And that's what I was trying to remember in the beginning. I'm like, I know the pikes were mentioned because that was when Dryden was basically like, look, I don't want to endanger my relationship with the pikes or anything like that. And that was when Han was like, look, they don't know us. They don't have to know we're working for you. We could just steal this and they'll never know the difference. And this is where we first meet the pikes, which of course play prominently in the Book of Boba Fett. And also in a lot of the
And in the
expanded
Clone
universe
Wars.
stuff. Yeah, the Clone
Even
Wars.
in the Clone Wars.
Yep. Which I think is really where they were introduced, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, unless
Yeah.
they were in some expanded universe thing, which is possible, but doubtful. But this is
At least
cool.
we've at least seen them. At least they were definitely seen
Right.
in the
Right.
Clone.
And so of course, things start to go a little crazy because L3 ends up starting this rebellion by taking the restraining bolts off of droids and freeing them, and then of course all the slaves start to be free, and then something that I don't have any visual representation for at the end of all this is when Chewbacca has to make a choice. Because, first of all, he goes and he tries to free his Wookiee brothers that have been enslaved. And so Han's like, okay, whatever. I don't know where Chewie is. He went to do. Maybe he'll come back. Maybe he won't. Yeah. He did. Again, he still doesn't really care at this point. Right? I mean, he likes Chewie and he's cool with him, but it's kind of like, okay, whatever. But then when all this stuff is winding up and they're trying to get on the Falcon and, Lando gets in it, which I think is hilarious, where he's like fighting and he's just like, I can't believe that, what's going on. That's when Chewie actually has the opportunity to go and find his tribe on Kashyyyk with his other Wookiees, or turn his back on that, on tribe and family, and go with Han and take his chances. And I think that that's, even though in the book Life Debt, which is part of the Aftermath trilogy, it references some of this stuff, and I think they purposely put some of that in Solo. Um, I don't remember which came first on that. I think Life That might have come after Solo though. But they're alluding to the fact that Chewbacca is making his choice, and that can't be understated. I mean, I think that was a really important part of that movie. That even if you look at the scene, it's not drawn out. You know?
No, but I mean, it is a very poignant moment though, for because yeah, it's like you're choosing this person who saved your life, but like you have like your family essentially, in a way, or your people who could, you could be with, and but he chose Han, I think, because of the life death thing, and it's just like he wants to, and it just shows you what type of character that Chewie is, because he talks, but we don't understand him. We only understand him as other people relate in context to what he's saying. So if Chewie is
Mm-hmm.
growling about something, Han might make a reference like, well, I don't know, fly casual. Like, okay, we know then that Chewie was talking about this. So it's based off of a reference, but to really see like, okay, to see that Chewie is really about his people, liberating them, making sure that, he cares about his culture, but at the same time, his honor won't allow him to
Mm-hmm.
leave Han. And that's almost like in the Cleon kind of way. Once again, I keep making all these Star Trek comparisons today,
Well,
but
that's
we
what
do
we
that on
do.
this show.
I mean, that's what
Yeah,
we
I said
do.
we do that on this show.
In fact, it's amazing that we've gone this long without it actually in the show. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It does have that vibe to it. And I think it's great that they illustrated that. And of course, L3 basically sacrifices herself. And
Hmm.
that had a very much of a kind of a, not
Yeah.
quite, because it wasn't a true self-sacrifice in the sense of like K2SO, where
All
he
right.
knew, okay, that's it. But she was fighting for a cause. And it was kind of like she finally achieved what she feels she was designed for. And
Yeah, and Lando felt, like Lando's reaction to it too was just like,
oh, I know, it was kind of surprising actually when I
I
first
know.
saw it. I'm like, wow, all right.
Exactly.
Must have been good. It's like,
Like,
dude, you can
man,
put the adapter on an R2 unit. It's okay. But I mean, the thing is, one of the things that I thought was really cool, though, that was a really, if you want to play an interesting drinking game to this whole show tonight, every time I say the word cool, you'll be obliterated within the first 15 minutes of this show. But
Hmm.
what was awesome to me was the fact that they took L3's central computer and plugged it into the Falcon. So now she was a
Yeah.
permanent fixture of the Falcon, which explains a lot of like the weird, almost beyond amazing, like the Falcon almost had its own survival mechanism. It wouldn't, no matter what happened, they would always be able to get out of it somehow. Now, a lot of that, of course, was the
Hmm.
brilliance of Han and Chewie, but it just added a really nice texture, I think, to the story. That's probably the best way to put it. All right, and then of course we get to see now. They're gonna fly the Kessel Run because they have to get out of there in a hurry, and basically the idea is, okay, they could take this one path that's been forged through, or they could break through and go in this very unconventional way. And I thought that it was really nice that you're seeing Han and Chewie now piloting the Falcon. This is the way it's meant to be. This is what you've been waiting for, basically,
Hmm.
which I thought was nice.
Yeah, I mean, finally seeing them at the helm of the Falcon was like, okay, now the adventure begins almost, and it's like I said, it's the Kessel Run.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're gonna see like, okay, what the heck this even is.
Well, it's kind of like this. So essentially, it starts out where there's just like a gang of TIE fighters behind them because they run into this Imperial blockade. And this really kind of gave me Exegol vibes, to be honest.
Oh man,
A
absolutely.
lot of elements of this really sort of reminded me of Exegol, totally. And it was, that creature. That was actually
Yeah,
one
man,
of
that
the
thing was
freakiest
freaky,
creatures, man.
man. I would have wet my pants, man.
I
I probably would have
easily
passed.
probably
Yeah,
passed out, heart attack, wet my pants,
all of it.
soiled my like
Somebody grab an AED,
yeah,
because
pretty
it's
much like you might as well, I would have just been, I don't know, I would have been
yeah,
out. It just would have been over. But I thought this is really like that. There was this one scene in here that I absolutely loved, and it shows like Han's piloting skills. He's going through, and there's that one TIE fighter, and he like flips the Falcon and smacks the TIE fighter like
yeah.
into a asteroid or
Oh,
something. I'm like, dude, that's next level.
that's
See,
sweet. Well, that's what I'm saying. Is like he's so talented, and then like kudos before you even continue. Like this shot, this once again, the cinematography of this
oh
movie, man.
yeah,
Like this shot right here is just that's a whole poster. Like how would you hang that in the house? But yeah, I mean, the fact that Han was so skilled as a pilot, and you really get to see,
mm-hmm.
and that's why you understand like his cockiness. When he's talking about, all right, yeah, I think I got it, because when you see the stuff that he's had to kind of just even in this whole scenario, you're like, okay, nothing should freak him out.
Right. I mean, this is one of those deals, and then of course, you know, and this is the thing that I always point out. It's the whole thing with this whole Kessel Run scene. I mean, there's other stuff. I didn't want to, almost go frame by frame on this thing. We'd be here all night.
Hmm.
But one of the cool things was when they had the idea to put some of the coaxium, like a drop or something, into the
Hmm.
drive, and just because it's the only thing, it's the only way they could have escaped that maw or whatever, that gravitational pull that was pulling
The
them down.
pull,
And it was
right?
great. I mean, that was, again, this is really good storytelling. This is putting our heroes in
Hmm.
real danger. This isn't like, that was one of the things, and I know we're going to get into this big time when we do the Rise of Skywalker, but
Oh
that was one
yeah.
of my criticisms of it. The heroes were never in any real danger through that movie. And everything just kind of happened. And
Just go to the
it,
next thing. It's like, all right,
yeah, it was cool. It was almost like if you set the RPG team type games on like the ultra easy level or something, to where there's just nothing. You just basically walking through every scene. That's kind of how it was. But it wasn't like that in
yeah,
this film.
yeah, you definitely felt the danger in that whole gravitational pull. And it was just like, man, how the heck are they going to get out of here?
That's what I was thinking. And then when it actually like just crunched up that animal and turned it into dust, and you're like, man, that must have hurt.
right.
But then what was cool, of course, is that by the time they get back, and this is what I really like too, they gave you transition type scenes that weren't themselves being dragged out. I guess it's getting late. But you know what I mean?
Well,
It's
I
like
mean,
they didn't
yeah.
really,
Well, it allows you to breathe.
it allows you to breathe, but I mean, it wasn't like, for instance, they pretty much now, after they go, they get back down, they're about to meet their Crimson Dawn folks or whatever, and then of course Emphas Nest comes, and she basically tells them the real story. Like, listen, we're not. It turns out she's one of the architects of the rebellion,
Hmm.
and this is where Han has to make that critical choice. This is almost a flip side of what he's doing in Episode 4, where I can take my money and go pay off my debt to Jabba, or I can go
Or
back and help these people that are on this suicide mission, which of course is what he ends up doing. And in this, it's a similar thing. Although they were kind of outnumbered and outgunned in this situation, but they actually talked to Emphas and listened to her, and she was like, look,
Mhm.
we're not smugglers and pirates. The
but
Empire
not who you
destroyed
think
our
we are.
homes, and yeah, exactly. And they just, it's like, no, we're trying to sell this stuff, get the money to rebuild houses, feed and clothe our, the people whose lives are messed up, and it was a noble thing. And there was that scene, of course, where, Emphas and Qi'ra are standing together, and she's like, I think he's going to do it. I think he's talking him into it. And, of course, we didn't hear what Han was telling Beckett, and that's, of course, because that's going to play out later when, time moves on here. But I just thought that this was a really interesting scene because, again, it's not what you expected from this film.
Yeah, I mean, I love this is where the chess match starts to form a little bit. In these beginning scenes, as you're getting information, and as Han is getting information, he's forming plans and things in his head. It's just we haven't seen it come to fruition yet, but we will later.
Yeah. Yeah, we will later. And I mean, the main thing I think that's cool about this scene too is it's not cliched. Nothing in this movie really was that cliche to me. I mean, there have been
Right.
people that have pointed some things out, but it's like, okay, you're
It's
looking
not
at this from a
overbearing or
surface
anything.
level. Yeah, exactly. That too. I mean, even the cliched things weren't too overbearing. So then, of course, they bring the stuff back, and Dryden is suspicious. He's thinking, okay, it's not real.
It's Beckett. You double cross.
Yeah, I mean, did you, it's like, come on. And of course, we saw that Han had the gun in the lid and all that stuff, and they're about to try to pull something on Dryden. But what was interesting to me about this is the fact that Han's now changing a little bit here. He's braver. He's not quite as intimidated by Dryden as he once was. And he probably should be, because Dryden's no joke, as we'll see later. But I don't know, I just thought that this was, yet again, some nice incremental growth. I mean, we see the growth between Solo, Episode 4, 5, throughout the saga, let's say. But it's nice to see the incremental growth even in the film.
Sure. I mean, and you made a very, very valid point about how at this juncture now Han is not as intimidated, and it kind of foreshadows a little bit later, which we talked about in Empire, when he draws his gun on Vader. He's just popping off at Vader like, dude, you gotta, like, he's really not intimidated by, I mean, he gets it, but it's like, dude, do you know who you're shooting at?
Yeah, it's like, it's probably not a good idea. But this is a really cool thing. And of course, we see that Beckett betrayed him. That's how Dryden knew, that something was up. And this is the choice that Beckett made. Beckett could have, whereas Han made the right choice, Beckett made the choice that, again, this would almost have been like if Han decided to just take the money and run in Episode 4. That would have been a Beckett thing to do. And I think that one of the cool things about Beckett, he wasn't even a one-dimensional character. I mean, he seemed throughout this whole film, the way that he was mentoring Han was almost as a do as I say, not as I do. Like, you're a good guy. You need to learn some things, but, don't be like me. Be better than me. He even tries to tell Han, like, look, don't trust anybody. It's like he's foreshadowing. He's trying to give warning. Don't be overly trusting. Don't be, he's trying to give him some tools to survive in the galaxy, and he's trying not to. He's still going to be selfish and look out for himself. But you could tell that there's a little bit of, I'm going to try to teach this guy how to survive on his own.
He wants to mentor him a little bit, but at the same time, it's like, I'm your best teacher, because watch.
Well, we all learn by doing, right?
Yeah, right, exactly.
And then, of course, everything unleashes, and now Dryden all of a sudden has like this light. I don't know. Now this totally looks like one of those Klingon type weapons to me.
Right, it does. Like a
Except
bat
it's
look.
sort of like the lightsaber version of it, you know?
Well, yeah, it's like a dagger kind of thing.
And I mean, the thing is that Kira, I love the way that it looked like she was gonna kill Han or whatever, and then she turns around and cuts Dryden, and it's like she made her choice too.
Yep.
It's like no, not to mention the fact she wants a little bit of a job promotion, no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
But again, Kira, she's become one of my favorite characters, and when people say, well, I don't know about this. I mean, to me, this is almost like a Rocky 5 scenario because the Dryden, with Kira's skills, and I guess you could just argue that her skills aren't, because a lot of the comics that are dealing with her now and her leading Crimson Dawn are actually between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. So there's still another 10, 12 years or something until then. But she's still very skilled, and obviously she beats Dryden. But, she actually fought Vader in one of the comics. And again, she was fearless. She just went up against Vader, man. And it's just like, you know what? And the Emperor respected her, and, it was actually quite brutal. So I just thought,
Kira seems, she's definitely formidable, and she's definitely grown from that speeder chase, and that's the thing. Like, you see her in the speeder chase, and then now she's fighting Vader, and it's just like, man, then, well, I was about to go to the other part, but we haven't gotten to that part yet. But
well,
yeah,
we'll get there.
it's
We'll get there
just,
right now.
yeah, there it
Because,
is, right?
now we got the return of Maul, because the coolest thing was after she saves Han, and Han's like, okay, I'll meet you downstairs or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
she's turning off the blinds. And I remember I was sitting there thinking to myself, like, is she going to double cross? Like, I was waiting for some crazy twist, but
I mean,
the
it still
twist
happened,
was,
but
yeah, well, I mean, this was the first appearance of Maul in film after the Phantom
Mhm.
Menace. I mean, we know this guy's popped up all over the place in the Clone Wars. It's like he's the Jason Voorhees, basically, of the Star Wars universe. This guy can't die. But it was he did take over Crimson Dawn at one point, and I thought it was really awesome and very astute of the story group or whoever was managing the continuity, because they actually included Maul in this whole thing. And I believe he was voiced by Sam Witwer in this one, because Sam
Yep.
Witwer did the Clone Wars version and Rebels.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So
Yeah,
they let him
and
do
this was
this.
just so cool. I mean, when this popped up as a twist, I was like, "Whoa!"
Oh, I know. And
I
I
did
did
not
never
see
see
this.
that coming. Yeah.
Yeah,
That was
I was
nothing
like,
was leaked or anything.
okay,
When I
no,
saw him
man,
pop up, I'm like, because at first I
no
thought maybe it
way.
was the Emperor, because it's kind of what it looked
Well,
like, and then
yeah,
you saw the face.
he was like, "No, that's not." I thought it was like another one or something like that, and I'm like, "Wait, that's not Maul, is it?" And it's like, "Yep." I'm
And
like,
small.
wow.
And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to see a Solo too, because they're setting up the whole Crimson Dawn thing. You could go into their whole thing between them and the Pikes, Black Sun,
Mm-hmm.
the Hutts. I mean, this was just a really, I was like, oh man. I remember thinking in the theater when I first saw this, like, I cannot wait until Solo 2 at this point, because at that point it was planned to be a trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like ready to get in line for this. And then, the whole Han versus Beckett thing, which I thought was a really cool, there it is again, really great way of dealing with this, because this was that standoff, and this was, I saw what you did there. It was just the way that was done, and the fact that Han shot first. I mean, Beckett was in the middle of his little speech because he was going to kill him, but he was talking, and Han just plugged him.
Yep.
And, the way that he was kind of holding Beckett and they had that last little exchange. I mean, it was just a really great ending, I thought, to that relationship. And Beckett almost being proud of him at this point.
Yeah, it was almost like an emperor thing, like a Sith thing. Like, okay, you kill the master type.
It's like, now you understand. Now you get it. Now you're doing the right thing. Now I know you'll be able to survive. And again, there was a lot of old Western type elements to this movie as well, which we didn't really touch on throughout the film, but especially here.
Oh, yeah.
The gunslinger kind of thing. I mean, there was just a really great sort of Western outlaw kind of vibe to this whole film. I thought was phenomenal.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, especially in this scene, I mean, it definitely looks like, Clint Eastwood is on the other side of it,
Yeah, right. Right. And it was just, it was just a beautifully played out moment. And I mean, again, I think that people get really lost in some of the more superficial aspects of it. They don't really dig deep. And that's the whole point of why we're doing this, actually, is trying to dig deep into these films and say, listen, there's a lot here if you just dig into it. And that's one of the reasons why, yes, I know I create these things with a lot of slides and all that, but it's like, look, if we're going to actually take the time to dig deep into the film, let's dig deep into the film. Because this is going to stand forever, I mean, we're not going to, we might revisit this like in 10 years if we're still doing this. I don't know. But the point is, this will stand now as a record to anybody that wants to go back and watch us digging into these films. And this is given me a lot of those Padme episode 3 vibes. Yeah. Because she knows that she can't meet Han. She knows she has to leave him behind in order to protect him and not get him mixed up. Although, ironically enough, that's exactly what he's going to end up doing in a lot of ways. But she's trying to sacrifice what she wants for what he needs.
Right. Yeah, and that was just like, man, he fought and they were so close to being together again. And,
I know.
And they had it for a second, and then it's gone again. So
yeah. And that's what was just so tragic about it. And again, I totally got the Natalie Portman, Padme episode 3 vibes, where you saw her looking out the window and everything's falling apart, and he's looking out the window and everything's falling apart, and you just know that they're basically caught in the trap of their own circumstances, and that's what's happening here. And Ronaldo actually brings up a couple of good points here. He says, first of all, going back to Beckett, he said it was a good end for Beckett. It's one of those examples where a character's story arc ends with his death. And that's a very good point. That it was a fitting end. He basically died in the way that he lived. And then he goes on to say,
died by the sword.
Exactly.
Basically.
And he says, I think we'll see qi'ra again at some point. And there's been rumors. I mean, Emilia Clarke was apparently at Lucasfilm at some point. She's been kind of coy about whether or not she would reprise the role of qi'ra. In some interviews, it almost seemed like she wouldn't be, but Liam Neeson basically said, yeah, I'm a film snob. I'm not going to do TV. And there he is as a hologram in Obi-Wan doing a scene. So you can't, you got to take it with a grain of salt. So absolutely, I think we're going to see more of qi'ra. And even if it's not in live action, I think we definitely will see her more, maybe in animation. And look, if you guys are really into this character, I'm telling you, get the Crimson Reign, the
comics,
yeah, the whole comic series, man. I mean,
War of the Bounty Hunters and
War of the Bounty Hunters, yes. And then of course, this part of it's wrapping up with Enfys actually giving Han some coaxium as like a little bit of a thank you for turning over the entire shipment to her. And she again, now this is a choice. At this time, Han says no. She's like, hey, you should join our rebellion. It's like, we need people like you.
Exactly. And it's like, oh, he'll be back.
Yeah, and that was a really cool thing that I thought was neat too, because that was a twist I did not see coming, was her being part of the rebellion, actually. So, kudos to them for actually doing this. And again, it was another poignant scene. It really illustrated the fact that Han needed to make a choice. And this time, he's like, not now. And then, of course, he's got to go back, right? He's got to win the Falcon. This is the infamous sabacc game that we had always heard about in interviews with Lucas and all that in the expanded universe, and now we get to see it. And it was really cool how Han sort of pulled the same thing he did with Beckett, but on Lando, where he's making him think one thing and really another thing's happening, because Lando only won that last game because he had that little contraption with the card.
Yeah, the cards, yeah. And Han found out about it, but then it was like it's already,
right,
too late. But, this time Han kind of prepared game plan for it.
Yep, took the card. Lando's trying to win. He's freaked out, and so Han gets the Falcon. And that was just such a cool, just again, the way that their characters were. It made
Lando's
you want
reaction to it.
I know. And really, Lando's reaction to a lot of different stuff in this movie was great. And it made you want to see, I want to see a Han and Lando-centric thing.
Like adventure.
Yeah. Yeah, because that would just be really cool.
That whole line when it was like, when Lando says, I hate you.
Oh, I know.
And he's like, I know. And it's the whole, Luke, it's from the whole Empire thing.
Yeah, I mean, it just, and again, it really informs the whole story when you see them interacting again in Empire Strikes Back, and then again in Return of the Jedi. You could see the growth in their friendship, but also somewhat of the foundation, what it's based on, why they are the way they are. And now that they have the Falcon, they're on to their next thing. And I think it was cool when he was talking about, hey, there's this job on Tatooine or something. And I think he might even said we got to go talk to the Hutts or something like that. And you're like, okay, they're setting up a Solo 2. Solo 2 probably would have been, this is how he gets hooked up with Jabba.
Yep, and the relationship he had with him, yep.
And I mean, I wanted to see that so bad. So, I mean, from that standpoint, I would say make Solo 2 happen.
Yeah, I mean, that would be cool. I mean, it could possibly happen. We never know. I mean, Bob Iger, taking over, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, at least if they did, I would even be fine. Actually, instead of that, I would rather see a Disney Plus series that can go a few seasons, because, instead of just doing a couple extra films, let's get into this a little bit. Let's do an actual in-depth, because there's a lot of stories you can tell. And Alden said he would do it. I mean, I don't know if Donald Glover, but even if Donald Glover didn't want to commit to it, he can pop up every once in a while. So to me, that would just be cool. Again.
Yep, that's
take
the
a
word
drink.
again.
Yep.
All right. Let me get
Yeah, there you go. Good luck getting up tomorrow. It's like, but of course, you guys have sat here, you've listened to everything that we think and what Ronaldo thinks. But what about you guys? What do you think? Let us know what you think of Solo: A Star Wars Story in the comments section. Make sure, of course, you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this. We're going through our Monday series right now of what is Star Wars. We started out with the legacy of Star Wars and defined, well, what makes this franchise what it is, and pretty much how Lucas went in and created it and what the intention was and his influences. And then, of course, we followed it up. We began with the original trilogy, and we started analyzing those. And then we moved on to the prequels, and now we're into the standalones. So next week, of course, the way our schedule is going, I hesitate to say that, but hopefully next Monday live at 8 o'clock, we're going to be doing Rogue One. So you're not going to want to miss that. And we still got to do, so this Friday at 8, we're going to do episodes 8 and 9 of The Bad Batch, because we know we're a little bit behind on that. And then the following week, we'll do episodes 10 and 11, and we should be caught up at that point. So we look forward to seeing you guys on Friday. Again, leave a comment in the comment section of what you guys thought of Solo, any of the points that we made. Maybe you want to discuss, debate, whatever. It's all good. Leave it in the comment section. So with that, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.